There's a Jaguar on the loose. Kevin Alcantara makes his big league debut with the Cubs as they fall to the Phillies 9-6 yesterday. We're going to talk about Alcantara. We're going to talk about Javier Assad, who got the start for the Cubs. That and more on this edition of the Cubs Baseball Channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section. Let us know how you were impressed by Kevin Alcantara in his big league debut. But for now, here's your invitation to our show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball Channel. My name's Anthony Pasquale. He is Mick Gillespie. You can find us on Twitter. He's a broadcaster, Mick, and I am at ant_Pasquale3. Mick, great to have you on because I think you have a really good history of watching a guy that made his big league debut yesterday. As Kevin Alcantara got to start in right field for the Cubs. The move was announced a few hours before the game yesterday. He was 1 for 4 with a run. He flew out to the warning track, and the single was actually an infield hit. But you've seen this guy play for a long time. What are your thoughts on the Jag?
Yeah, you know what? This is a guy I watched play a lot. The Jaguar. He's a center fielder. I never thought he would play center field in the big leagues, but a corner outfield to me would be a pretty good defensive corner outfielder. He's the guy that the Cubs got back. He and Caleb Killian for Chris Bryant and that deal.
He came over for Rizzo.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He came over for Rizzo in the Yankees deal. Yeah, you're exactly right. And anyway, yeah, I mean, he's a guy because it was Alcantara. Canario that came over with.
Yes, he was from San Fran.
Yeah. But yeah, so he came over in the Rizzo deal, and he's got the ability to be a really good player. I always wondered about his maturity, just hustling balls out and getting upset when he didn't have success. And baseball is one of those games. I mean, you're not going to have success, but sure. I've also seen him tear it up. He started the season in Double-A, like, a big offer in the 20 somewhere. And then all of a sudden he got like 13 hits and 20 at bats and turned it around, or something like that. So he's a really talented player for a guy that's long and lanky. He's able to kind of hit the inside pitches with those arms and kind of direct it the other way. He's got some power, but he really hasn't been able to refine that power yet where you think, hey, this guy's a power hitter. I'm curious to see kind of what happens here with this. It was a surprise move for me, but I was surprised when they promoted him to AAA. I think in the minor leagues, one of the things you want to do is really, kind of bear down on bad habits and work on those. Even when you have somebody that's a good guy with a lot of talent, there's issues that you have to be able to deal with that if you don't get in the minor leagues, you go to the big leagues and you do that. And not only could you lose that player, but you could lose the whole clubhouse, So I'm curious to see kind of how this all pans out, but we got 4 games left. Now we got 3 games left. Why was Miles Mastroboni on the roster and not these moves being made a month ago? I'm like, why haven't we been seeing this since this team's been out of it for so long? So, I mean, I don't want to be hypercritical, but we've missed an opportunity to really work in a lot of these guys. I'm glad it's happening now. The unfortunate part of it, though, is that there's only 3 games left.
Yeah, I think it was pretty direct in response to Suzuki spraining his ankle the other night. I think they wanted to get another outfielder up here. Because with Bush day-to-day and Suzuki day-to-day, Bellinger slides to first, and then you really don't have that, right fielder unless you wanted Tauchman out there for the next 3 days. So I think in that way it made sense. And for those of you wondering why not Owen Casey if he's the better player, he's not on the 40-man. Alcantara was. So it made sense in that sense. But with September and you being pretty much out of it with very low playoff chances, I don't understand how your September call-up was Mastroboni and not this guy in the first place, or Shaw or Triantos or whoever, just to get some at-bats at the major league level. But at the very least, it gives us all a reason to tune in these next 3 games to watch Alcantara and see, what kind of sample size we can get out of him and if he impresses us. But that brings me kind of to my next question for you. Where does he fit into the 2025 plans? What's your first take on that?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm really curious. I mean, this is another one of those questions that I have about the configuration of this roster, because you have him, you've got Alexander Canario, and you have Owen Casey that were, in the minor leagues, but then you also have Suzuki signed, and then you have Hap signed, and then you also may have Bellinger opt back in, which means he's signed. And then what about Mike Tauchman? And
And you still have Pete in center.
right, and you got Pete Crow-Armstrong, who's your best defensive outfielder. So
Right.
there's so many question marks about just the way that they've lined everything up. Now I'm not saying that there's not a game plan. It's just hard to see it right now.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be some moves made to me. The other thing too could be maybe the Cubs are thinking, they may move one of these young outfielders, and just by putting him in the big leagues, you kind of give major league teams a look like, hey, maybe they really think that this guy's, an everyday player, a big time prospect. I'm not sure yet. I mean, I think he's a good player. I just don't know how good. I don't know. He's not Owen Casey, and he's not Alexander Canario, but he's good. He's got a lot of talent. But like I said, there's definitely some question marks. He's on the 40 man. You get him to the big leagues. The other thing too is there's a political aspect to this. When you make a trade for someone, you got to go to the ownership and go, hey, we made a trade. Look, the guy got to the big leagues. So it's a success for your front office. When you make a trade and those guys don't get to the big leagues, it's like, well, you made a trade. You traded Anthony Rizzo, and what did you get back for him? Hayden Wesneski? Was Hayden Wesneski the other guy in that deal? Whatever. I mean, it's hard. There's so many trades. It's hard for me without looking it up.
It was that prospect. I don't think we've even seen him in AAA. It was like Vizcaino.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and so it was another trade that got, maybe it was
Efros was
Efros, right. So, it's going to be interesting just to kind of see if they really feel like this guy's a future player for them, or if they're just kind of, or is this one of those deals where, hey, he's up there a little bit. He's on the 40 man, like you said, it's up there a little early, but we can go to the ownership and say, hey, look, we made it there, or what? I don't know, because I feel like there's just some issues there that need to be ironed out, and maturity was one of them. Running out ground balls, stuff, little things that young players that get frustrated do. I'll tell you, Pete Crow-Armstrong's a guy that was always frustrated, but he would run his ass off and then slam his batting helmet. Well, he still does that, right? Like, I mean, how many times you've seen him out of first? And I don't have a problem with a guy doing that when they're given an effort. I do have a problem when I see a guy hit a routine fly ball and walk to first.
Yeah.
Or strike out, and he doesn't want, and it's in the dirt, and they don't want to run the first base. Have those things been figured out? I don't know. But when I saw them, they would rear their ugly head, and you sit there and shake your head going, man, he's too good to be making these type of mistakes, because he's got the ability to be a pretty good player. So I was, like I said, Owen Casey's not on the 40 man. Owen Casey deserved to be in the big leagues this year, and he didn't get that chance.
Yeah, we'll have to keep our eye on him for sure in spring training. I'm sure he'll knock down the door for a roster spot come opening day next year. It was a small sample size, but Alcantara's first MLB hit was on a ground ball to third that he beat out. So maybe some of that hustle is getting back into his picture. It's got to be, I would assume, for a lot of these young guys, watching the way Pete Crow-Armstrong attacks first base would make a lot of these guys think, hey, you know what? I might be able to steal a few extra points on the batting average if I bust it out of the box. So that might be something that Pete Crow-Armstrong might be instilling in some of these guys. But you kind of nailed it. We won't have enough of a opportunity to know what this player is in these next 3 games, and it could be just because the Cubs are going to try to dangle him in a trade. You never know, but
they have to do something.
Exactly. And we might not ever get the chance to see Alcantara or Canario get their full go in a Cubs uniform just because of the way this current roster is set up. So that'll definitely be one of the things we'll keep our eyes on close this season. But the Cubs, or this offseason, I should say, the Cubs fell to the Phillies yesterday, 9-6. A lot of former Cubs continuing to do damage. Kyle Schwarber was on base twice. Nicholas Castellanos, 3 hits, a homer. It's frustrating to watch, but I will say one thing that was encouraging is we've been talking about this guy and how he hasn't had any power like at all this season. Nico Hoerner had his first 2-home-run game. He flipped 2 bombs out into left field. It was nice to see him swinging a little bit harder, and we've noticed that he's kind of been swinging on that uppercut trajectory a little bit more this year instead of on a line. And I think you and I have both been pretty critical of that adjustment for him, but he looked pretty strong yesterday. He's having a really good September, and his season averages are all going up. I wonder if that's going to make him a more attractive trade piece for the Cubs, or if it's going to make them a little bit more confident in him at second base for next year. But nonetheless, a really strong game from Hoerner yesterday.
It's like, I look at this Cubs team and I'm always like, what's like the long-term plan here? You know, here's another guy, then there's like 3 guys that are an option to take his job, you know, with Shaw and Triantos, and, you know, and I know BJ Murray had some injuries this year and really didn't push the, you know, the table like the other 2 guys, especially Shaw. But you know, what are they going to do with Nico? I don't know. I like him a lot, though. You know, some of the stuff that he does in the field, he's been so consistent. He just does things the right way. But I just don't think he has. I figured that eventually he would have a lot of power. I thought that he would kind of be like a Rhino, you know, like where he hit the line drives. Always, he reminded me of Rhino a little bit, just kind of the way his shoulders were, and you know. But Rhino eventually adjusted and started hitting the home runs, and Nico really hasn't done that. And I think at this point, I don't know that that's just what he's just not that guy. Man. He's just a singles doubles guy.
And I think about that too, but I also look at, you know, second baseman throughout baseball, and relative to that position, which is historically not a big power position. You look at the stats, and we know he's one of the best defensive second basemen in the league. Offensively, there's only probably like 2 or 3 that you could say are for sure better than him. And if you have a top 5 guy at a position, I'd be in no hurry to move him out the door. But if you got a guy knocking on the door that you think could be a top 1 guy at that position, you know, maybe you try to make some room for him. I don't know how confident they are in Shaw or Triantos, but
well, the other thing too is that this team needs stuff. And if you could trade him to a team that's like, hey, you know what, we want a Gold Glove winning second baseman that gets on base, a singles doubles guy to set the table. Maybe we'll give you a reliever that's really good, but maybe we don't feel like we have that's an expendable position for us. That's how trades are made. You know, it's like, hey, maybe we'll we don't want to give the guy up, but we want this, and you guys want that. Or maybe sometimes it's there's players who they feel like just need a different home, you know, go somewhere else. The crazy thing to me is you just don't see a lot of those type trades anymore. You know, like back in the 80s,
my
90s,
brother was saying that today. You don't see a lot of player for player anymore.
Right. It's like, hey, we just wait to the trade deadline. We might flop a couple guys, you know, we'll wait until somebody's on waivers and sign. You know, the Cubs are in a position where I think they're going to have to do some of that just because they've got all these contracts, all these guys signed. And I said it before, and some of you guys were, you know, agreed, and some of you guys didn't agree in the comment section. I just don't look at this team and see a whole lot of star players. I see a lot of good players. I see a lot of good to average guys, but I don't see a lot of stars. You know, I don't see a lot of those guys where you go, when you look through the lineup, you're like, well, I got to watch out for this guy every time he's up. Guys, there's players that are able to perform when they're hot, you know, or certain game, like Hap, you get a great example. Like he'll disappear for a week, and then all of a sudden he'll just absolutely torch a team for a couple games and carry you. But I don't look at this team and think there's a Chris Bryant, there's a Javi Baez back in their prime, or an Anthony Rizzo. You look through this lineup and you're like, man, it doesn't matter who you're throwing out. These guys are going to bust them up if they're having their day. You make a mistake, right? And to me, winning a World Series is not having a team full of average to slightly above average guys. You got to have a team full of star players. That's what, I mean, look, that's what broke the curse. So if I'm looking at this roster construction right now, they want to get over 80 wins. They're going to have to make some moves, because this is an 80-win roster. This is we're the best team not to make the playoffs. And you know what that tells me? That you're just the same as the White Sox. You're just the same as everybody else that didn't make the playoffs. You're first, last. That's all.
Yeah, you're going to be on your couch just like they are. It
Yeah, just
doesn't
like
matter
everybody
if
else,
they
right?
won or
They're just
lost
gonna get
60
more
more
balls in
games.
the lottery than you.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it is. But I guess the question then becomes for this team, and you and I both watch this team every day, but we're not evaluators, we're not scouts, we're
Right.
not those positions. But it's going to come down to whether or not you think that moving forward, is Shaw a superstar? Is Casey a superstar? Is Canario? Is Triantos? And that's what you have to try to figure out when you're trying to make room for some of these guys. But
Right.
it is going to be a really
Casey.
busy offseason in terms of, who are they going to make room for? Who is going to be the victim of some of those decisions? But another guy I want to talk about, Javier Assad, got the start yesterday. Only went 4 1/3, 8 hits, 8 runs, 3 walks, and 3 strikeouts. Also allowed 3 homers. Not his best outing, which means he ends his season 7-6 with a 3.73 ERA. And I know you and I have both been pretty high on Assad, especially as a starter, because he wasn't supposed to be this year. And with injuries to Tyone and then Steele, he was inserted into the starting rotation and made 29 starts this year. So he's done a really good job of being available and going out there. But what Craig Counsell has said a lot of times this year is that if you can't, go 6 innings or throw 100 pitches, we don't want you as a starter. He said that in many different ways this year, right? And that brings me to my question for you. Javier Assad, 29 starts. Guess how many times he got through the 6th inning? So completed 6 innings or into the 7th or 8th.
Yeah, not many.
7 out of 29 starts did he go through the 6th inning. And listen, he's been pretty good, especially the first couple times through the order. But if you have a guy that you really don't trust to get through that 3rd spot of the order, or a guy who is inefficient and can't get his pitch count to stay low enough to get through the order a 3rd time, that's a good recipe for a long relief guy. Like, that's just kind of what he factors in my eyes. And I wonder if you think Javier Assad is going to be a starter in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think you keep him around. He's someone that when you have a whole bunch of injuries and you need somebody to pop in and start, maybe he's your long guy next year.
Yeah.
But
He's definitely an effective major league pitcher. I just don't know where.
The problem is that the Cubs have had so many injuries. I mean, remember at the beginning of the year, it was like somebody new was injured in the pitching staff every year. I mean, every day.
Yeah.
And so he was someone that we really had to rely on. So I think it is what it is with him. I think he's a really good player to have. But who knows? Maybe somebody that they feel like, hey, they can move out and he ends up somewhere else.
Yeah, it kind of felt like this year heading into the year, especially once you realized that this really wasn't going to be Kyle Hendricks' season. You kind of were stuck with like 4 or 5 guys that like were long relief guys. Like you had Wesneski, Hendricks, Assad, Wicks, Brown, like they all kind of factored into that equation. And sometimes you would have them be 1 inning guys. I know Ben Brown and Wesneski were 7th and 8th innings for a little bit. And then Hendricks came out of the pen for a while. And when Wicks got hurt and then he went back into the rotation, there were a bunch of different moving parts. But ideally, you get a role for those players. Like you decide next spring, is Ben Brown a reliever or is he a starter? And you let him be that. You don't keep moving him around. And hopefully you can figure out a way to piece this rotation and bullpen together, because we went through stretches for months of the season where the rotation was the strength of this team. And I'm probably going to get clowned for it, but there was a good portion of late July and August that the bullpen was the strength with Lopez and Miller and these guys. So there's definitely the pieces there to make that a complete pitching staff for a year. You just got to make the right moves and put the guys in the right spot. And hopefully this offseason, the Cubs are able to do that, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I still feel like that there's some shakeups coming. I mean, I just feel like that's the case. 4 years you haven't made the playoffs. You last year you fired David Ross. Hey, look, but I mean, let's give him his due. It wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, you know what? I'm not putting Craig Counsell down, but exact same record or right around there. I mean,
yeah, and I think the only thing,
same.
if they win 2 out of 3 against Cincinnati, you'll finish with the exact same record as last season, which I think only makes one thing apparent. It's Jed Hoyer's problem. Like, he thought throwing $8 million at a manager would make his roster look better, and all it did was expose his roster. You got the exact same record with a $40 million manager. That means that the roster isn't good enough, and I think this offseason will be a big test for Jed Hoyer if he's still in charge to fix it. So it'll definitely be something to keep an eye on. With the loss yesterday, the Cubs fall to 3 games above 500. 3 more games left against Cincinnati. So you win the series and you're 4 games over, lose the series, and you're 2 games over, get swept, and you finish the season at 500. So we'll keep our eyes on that as the next couple of days go along. The Cubs are off today, and then they welcome in the Reds for the final 3 at Wrigley Field over the weekend. But Mick, it's winding down. As much as I wish this team was playing playoff baseball, and as upset as I am that they're not, I'm going to miss watching this team play when it's this time next week.
Yeah, the season's going to be over. Playoff baseball is coming, and that's it's been kind of fun watching the Braves and the Mets and the Padres and the Diamondbacks. It was fun when the Cubs were in it last year until they didn't make it, but it's just what baseball is all about, is the playoffs, and that's here. But I'm going to miss it too, man. I am, and hopefully the Cubs don't take a step back. They take a step forward. And I don't know, man. I mean, look, we can sit around and talk. We'll be talking about this all offseason until I see a game plan that I think, okay, like when Theo took over and you knew what was going on and you saw the core players and all that stuff. Okay. Right now it just feels like this is a slightly above average roster and a slightly above average team.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different directions that they can go. So we'll keep an eye on what they end up doing. But for now, guys, thanks so much for joining us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Got you there. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Cubs are off, so we're going to be talking a little bit of roster stuff and seeing what we think the end of the season series will bring. But keep liking and subscribing in that comment section, and we will talk to you guys soon. Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.